This is encounter number 21 of Backyard Skeptics versus Christian Century Toastmasters. And I want to welcome you to what hopefully will be a nice encounter. This is an open forum in which each side will take turns. One person from one side will question one or more people on the other side. There'll be room enough to volley a few things back and forth if need be. And then when that's done, then the other side will exchange and do the same thing in return. We would like to aim for about an equal amount of time on each side. And of course, like previous encounters, we want to make sure that there is mutual respect while you're defending your positions admirably. So I'd also like to ask, how many in this group have ever done any presenting before? And I mean by that, you're in the panel. How many have done that? Okay, that's about half, 2/3 of the people. How many have done so twice or more? Twice or more. 3 times or more. Yeah, I've been up here. 3 times or more. 4 times or more. 4 times or more. Anybody else besides Dave would qualify. Okay, so that would make Wayne the champion. Let's give him a hand if you like, because he's been up here the most. Okay, all right. And here's hoping we'll have more such encounters. In fact, I was hoping to project the previous ones that we've had, because I made up a list here, and unfortunately we're under circumstances. Let me read to you some of them here. First one we had was Christianity versus atheism. Second one was Does God Exist, Part 1. Third one is Human Anatomy. Fourth is Does Prayer Work? Fifth is Rational Beliefs. Is there any set greater than the Bible set? Sixth is this a Christian nation? Seventh is Evolution versus Creation. Eighth is Christianity beneficial or detrimental? Ninth is Do the Laws of Science Comport with Creation? 10th is Answering Atheist Objections. 11th is Does God Have a Free Will? 12th is Historicity of Jesus. 13th, Does God Exist? Part 2. 14th is Open Forum. 15th, Homosexuality, Inborn or Pervasive. 16th, Another Open Forum. 17th, Inerrancy of Scripture. 18th, Abortion. 19th, How can or do we know what is true? And 20th, the reverse, How do or can we know what is true? And that brings us up to today for the third Open Forum. I mentioned these topics in case you would wish to think about things along those kinds of lines or along other kinds of lines. So, you may know that when New Year's Day rolls around, the Rose Parade has more or less a general theme under which almost all the banners, the floats that is, could participate in any given year, no matter what the theme is. So that's the kind of theme we have tonight. And Dave was the one who suggested the theme, and that is, if you had any one question that you'd like to ask the other side, what would that question be? The general theme enough. All right? So, Dave, since you're the one who made that suggestion, I'd like you to start off with the first question. And by the way, we have only until what, 9 o'clock tonight? Is that correct? 9. Okay, so we probably won't have any trouble there, but we need to be out here by 9. Dave, you get the first question. Make sure that you're close enough to the mic. The mics are for asking the questions and giving answers.
Here?
Yes.
Okay. My first question for the atheists is explain how the Pyramidion Heraclitean dilemma translates the Wesenthough into the Zweedom of modern existentialism through the outworking of the existential charismatic hermeneutic of Rudolf Bultmann into the linguisticality of existence and the deeper de-objectification of the superlapsarian instinct.
Dave, would you mind simplifying that a bit so that the rest of the audience can understand it?
I can answer that.
State your name when giving your response.
Sorry. Phil Calderon. The answer, Dave, is no. Next question.
All right. Do you have any volleys across? Any further question along the same line, Dave?
With all the scary things happening in the world, what's your best way to escape reality?
Okay, I'm just getting up here because that was a snarky answer. So, how to escape reality? Well, personally, I don't. What I try to do is understand how people are, how they act, how they believe, and you get that from learning, from life experience, and try to put that all in perspective, try to understand other people's point of view. It's difficult at times when you've got somebody like, let's say, you go to an extreme, you've got an ISIS type person and you're trying to get into their shoes. Obviously, this is not something that is good for society. How to cope with daily difficulties or just life difficulties in general, you don't really have a choice. You do it because you have to. This is kind of like to go to an extreme, like how do you get rid of fear of death, for example? We all know we're going to die one day. It doesn't matter even what side of the belief system you're on. So if you have a sort of a way to escape mentally to do that, you can go into the afterlife argument or belief system as an example. If you don't, you then learn, I think, to cope with it a little bit stronger. It's kind of what I'm finding for myself, and I'm finding some of that with others too. There's some things you can't escape, and there's some value to learning those lessons too.
All right.
May I?
Sure, Blaine. And by the way, you can address any one person, any several people, or the whole group, if you like. And that's true of the other side, too. Go ahead.
Okay, a Christian for 50 years, but not so now. Escaping from life, escaping from the pressures of life, escaping from reality, I don't know that that's a good thing in the first place. True, there are some wonderful experiences. You can think of a child at waiting by the chimney, going to bed early on Christmas Eve, and all the magic around that. But at some point, you really have to grow up. That's my feeling. That's what I think happened to me. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong with being a Christian. I understand how that happens. This is a Christian nation. There's the indoctrination, even on mother's knee, and that is strong and it's lasting. But it's a matter of growing up, I think, and facing reality.
All right. Will there be a question then from this side to the other?
Well, the pastor's going to...
Yeah, I was going to ask. My name is Mike Bosworth. I get to Pastor's Church. Thank you for coming tonight. This is really great. I love this. I really do. My question for you is, when a Christian, obviously a theist, but of the Christians, says they believe in inerrancy, what do you hear? What does that mean to you?
Somebody who hasn't participated, go ahead. We want to encourage participation from all if possible.
Technically, it means that there is no errors in Scripture. What the people who call themselves inerrantists back up to is saying that the autographs, original documents, had no errors, which is a moot point because you can't trace anything back to the original documents.
All right. Questions from this side?
Mark Smith. Question for the Christians. How would you distinguish a being who, let's say, was 99.9999999% equal to God from the actual God who is 100% God? What test, what rationale, what evidence, how would you go about that as being a fallible human being?
I don't understand the question. I mean, could you just
Let's say two divine beings came in this room right now, both claim to be God Almighty. And one of the beings was actually God, and the other being is almost exactly like God, but just a smidgen less in power. What tests and evidences and stuff like that would you subject these two beings to figure out who's the real God and who's the imposter? Let's say this other guy is Satan. He's Satan imitating Bible God.
I think we can. Dave hasn't. You just were up here for a few moments. Let's take Dave next. Did you want to answer that, Dave?
I'll take a shot at it.
Go right ahead. All right.
Yes, I was sitting there with my brother's dog, and he says basically well, let's see, my brother brings me food, gives me a nice place to live, does everything for me, he must be God. My brother's cat says he brings me food, he brings me everything, he gives me a nice place to live, I must be God. But I think there's an actual answer to this. Nobody is 99.9% like God, because God is immutable, he is omniscient, omnipresent, he has attributes that were not communicable, something that his creation doesn't have. Well, we were created in his image, we have a moral character, we have a lot of things that God has, and he illustrated that when he came here as a human being in the form of Jesus Christ. So there's a lot of attributes that we do share with God, but there's a lot that we don't. We're not even anywhere close. We're not even 1% what God is. I mean, God is eternal being. And one of the things that identifies God for who he is in Micah 5:2, where it says his goings forth were from everlasting. And that is the strongest Hebrew expression for meaning self-existent, something that only attribute that would be of God. In other words, a self-existent being. We all were created. So we have a beginning, but we also have an eternal character. The fact that we will go on forever, where we spend that eternity will depend on what we do with his son.
Okay, you have a retort? Yeah, if you have a response to that.
Yeah. You have to go with the hypothetical you're given. And if Satan were to come here tonight, the fallen angel, how would you personally be able to test that he's not eternal? You would not be able to, as far as I can see. You mentioned that as being one of the attributes of the real God, that he's eternal. Well, how do you, a finite being that lives for this long in eternity, determine that this being over here is actually had a beginning and may have an end? If a being were to come here and claim to be God, and he could do all the tricks that we've seen in the Bible, raise the dead, walk on water, fly through the air, predict the future, all of that, every single thing in the Bible he's able to do as far as we can see. How do you, puny humans, determine that this dude isn't God?
Okay, state your name too.
It's Bosworth. Okay. I think what you're asking is, how do I know what I know? How would I make that determination? This one's right, this one's wrong.
Well, let's just play Satan. How would you? Satan comes here tonight and duplicates everything in the Bible and claims to be God. How would you personally know for a fact that's not God?
Okay. Our buddy Michael Shermer would say that I'm going to select or discern which one is and which one's not based on what I want to believe. Does that make sense? So I'm going to believe what I want to believe, no matter how weird the idea is. So I may believe that Satan is God, or that Yahweh is God, or Moloch is God, or I'm God. I'm going to sincerely believe this. The smarter I am, the better my arguments will be for believing it. So ultimately, I'm the one who is going to judge, right?
Yes.
So ultimately, it's a matter of my opinion. That's it.
How would you arrive at your opinion, though?
How would I arrive at my opinion?
Yeah, this guy duplicates everything
Right.
that Bible God did.
Right. Well, I would have to say this is totally unscientific. Go with your gut. I think there's such a thing as intuition. I think there's such a thing as go with your gut. And then let the experience of your choice prove out whether or not you've made the correct decision. I was thinking of the old in less civilized, educated times. The God who wins is the God who's the real God. You know, so I was thinking about when the Babylonians took over and just stomped Jerusalem and took them all captive. At that particular time, you would say that the God of the Babylonians is the real God because they defeated the God of the Hebrews. If that makes any sense. So
Omnipotence should come into play there. So
Let's do the microphone if we could. We have to pick up the sound. Thank you.
oh, I was just going to say that omnipotence seems to factor in there. If the God who is winning is omnipotent, well, he's the real God. So I'm just supporting that thought.
yeah, it would make sense that way.
But that also assumes that the real God's going to bother to come down and join this battle. Usually, the real God, for some reason, just ignores us down here and lets us run off with any idea of God we have, and doesn't come down and say, "Hold up, that's not how it's done." So Satan could come down here and imitate God, and I think we as humans would have no way of knowing otherwise.
Yes. State your name first.
Patty Gashimura. And when you first said that, the 99%, I immediately got the idea that it was Satan versus God. In my experience, God wouldn't come down and do all that stuff. He calls us to him by loving us, by sacrificing his son for us. He doesn't do the power things. If you went back to Jesus when he was in the wilderness, when he was being tempted, Satan was telling him, throw yourself down from the temple. So if somebody came in this room and he started doing all those miraculous things, I would be very hesitant. And we have the Holy Spirit in us that can bear witness with things too. So I'm not smart enough to figure out things, so I would be praying and asking the Holy Spirit to show me who is the boss. But that would make me really suspect if someone came down here and did all the miracles like that.
Okay. Carrie, do you have a question or a comment? Which side are you going to be on this time?
I'm on this side this time.
Okay.
Kerry Cook, if the hypothetical is allowed, there would be no way to distinguish. But the hypothetical would not be allowed by the real God, if there is one, whether the real God is supreme being, creator of this universe, creator of mankind, judge of mankind, or even Bible God.
What question are you asking, Carrie?
His question.
No. You're answering the question or asking it? You're answering it. Okay. All right.
And my response to that would be, he didn't come down and stop Islam. He didn't come down and stop Joseph Smith. He didn't come down and stop David Koresh. He didn't come down and stop Jim Jones. Why would he come down and not allow Satan to come down and do what he does? Your God has not your God, but your God has a history of not doing anything to stop the bad guys. So I don't think your scenario would play out.
The real God, whether it's any one of those, would never allow the hypothetical situation to begin in the first place.
You just have to do it to the
Yes. State your name first.
Benito Frankie, how do we know that God is anything other than life?
Anybody on this side? Dave?
I've got an answer too, but I want to hog the mic.
Well, I would suggest that our cameraman and Dave, our moderator, also have the opportunity to answer a question or ask a question, since we are so shy on people. So I would like to add that. What was the question was?
How do we know God is anything other than
life? Well, the idea is that we have to have a creator for the creation itself. And of course, life itself didn't all of a sudden happen. At least we don't see that happening in the world today. Life just does not come from non-life. We've never seen that happen. So science is supposed to be what we can see and observe. And of course, we don't see and observe ex nihilo life coming from nothing, nor do we see life coming from inanimate objects. So obviously, God being a creator, he would create things from, at least by definition, he would be able to create life. He would be able to create something from nothing. So first he'd create matter, then he would create life, then he would be able to create order and complexity. But by definition, I don't think that there is you need an adequate cause to produce the effect. With the atheist position, there is no adequate cause. You have nothing. Nothing can't produce what we see around us. At least that's my opinion.
Okay, I think we should be having at least somebody on this side asking a question so that this side can answer. Do we have any questions? Yes, go ahead. And again, state your name first.
My name is Douglas, and follow up on that last comment there. I'd like to know from the atheist side, without committing the fallacy of infinite dependent material regress or violating the overall second law, how do you explain the existence of the cosmos?
Cosmos. Who on this side would like to take that?
Carl Sagan.
Carl Sagan's not alive. Okay.
I have no explanation for that. There are things that are beyond our understanding, currently beyond our understanding, maybe forever beyond our understanding. But that does not mean that I am to accept the fancies of goat herders, the religions that have been woven from their tales, and specifically that I need to accept that there was a Jewish-speaking God in a bush that spoke to a man who had been a murderer and was a fugitive, and a religion was born of that. And let me say this. Give me just a moment. We seem to have enough time for things tonight. The roots of Christianity include Constantine, who found, after a dream, that he could put this insignia on the Cairo insignia on his battle shields, and he was successful in that battle at Milvan Bridge. So, because of that, he just went on and maintained those insignias and did so much killing in the name of Christ. Later on, we have Clovis, who conquered, and he converted his vanquished to Catholicism. That's had a lasting impact in France and Germany. And we had Charlemagne, who in one day cut off the heads of 4,500 Saxons because they were not willing to convert to Christianity. And later still, there were 10,000 Gaelic Irish beheaded. Their heads were put along pathways to encourage submission to the church. These are the roots of our Christianity. The record is before us. These are the roots. And I would say, were it not for the barbarism, the pressure from the powers, that Christianity wouldn't even exist today.
Response?
Well, as I said at the outset, I was hoping we could avoid some fallacies like ad hominem, like appeal to ridicule, like genetic fallacy. I asked you a straightforward question, which you totally deflected into appeals to emotion. I'll take that as further evidence that you can't answer my question.
Okay.
Well, I answered the question with what information I had on that, and that was, I don't have an answer. Right? I just embellished.
On what grounds, then, can you assert that God does not exist? Not the specific diversions that you took, but God in any form, particularly in an omnipotent form. On what grounds can you assert that God does not exist as an atheist?
I don't wear the label of atheist, but I guess functionally I am that in some circles. On what grounds? I have no grounds to say that God does not exist. It's possible that God exists. It's possible that anything can happen. If we're talking about the universe, we say that the universe must have been created, right? It must have been created. Well, on the other hand, we say that God didn't have to be created. He was just always there. If God could always be there, why couldn't the makings of the universe always be there as well?
The next one will fall to somebody else. Go ahead.
Because as I stated at the outset, when you employ that argument, it commits two fallacies: infinite dependent material regress, and it violates general second law. Therefore, it makes it impossible for the cosmos to have always existed.
Well, then I think it's not a good question.
I'm sorry.
Then I think it's not a fair question. You don't really, you think you have the answer. I don't think you have the answer. But you're going to tell me that God is responsible. Which God? Which of, I know I'm wandering now, but which of the thousands of gods? See
you
I
divert,
okay.
Once again, from the fallacy. Those two fallacies make it logically and functionally impossible for the cosmos to have always existed. So Sagan was wrong. Okay? I'm not asserting any kind of religion here. I'm just trying to deal with a more basic concept of what produced the cosmos. And you don't seem to have any answer other than a fallacy.
By the way, we have a new...
May I just ask the gentleman, though, then, do you say that God always existed? And where did he come from?
Well, I would say that because, and if I could expand for a couple of minutes.
Would that be acceptable to the other side?
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Because observation shows that the entirety of the physical material cosmos is a series of dependent material events. It is subject to the fallacy of infinite dependent material regress and the second law, which means that it's logically necessary that something outside of that system produce that system. By outside, meaning have no physical material properties whatsoever. As such, it's not subject to those two fallacies. it becomes logically necessary that that outside entity, having none of those material properties, is also not subject to the problems associated with those fallacies, i.e., having no matter, no series, no events, but enormous amount of power and some way to organize and expedite and initiate that power. As such, there's nothing about that outside whatever, unlike everything in nature, that either could or needs to begin in order for it to exist. Therefore, the only mode in which it could exist is to have always existed. Therefore, unlike nature, that outside source did not come from anywhere.
Okay. I'll have just one comment of my own at this point. I'm not going to give too many. I believe this interchange illustrates the positions each party takes, and there is somewhat of a divergence of view, and I am greatly appreciative of the fact that each side is willing to consider what the other is saying and listen to the other side and make a judgments thereby, even though the worlds in which we are coming from are apparently radically different from each other. So I appreciate that. Question? Yes, go ahead.
Do atheists in general, or just your own opinion, have a meta-narrative that explains man's inhumanity to man? I mean, when you mentioned how Christians, the barbarism of people claiming to be Christ followers, totally, as far as I can tell, counter what the message of the Bible is. But besides just Christians, there's been people being horrible to people throughout the centuries, regardless if they're religious or not religious. Do you have an explanation as to why this species tends to devour itself?
I'd like to see if somebody else who hasn't been up to the microphone would like to take that. Anybody at all who hasn't been yet to the microphone? No? Okay, well then, you haven't? Gentleman in the back here? I'm sorry, in the third? Sorry, yes, you.
I've been, but I can answer if nobody.
Okay, go ahead.
Man's inhumanity to man. Simple question, huh? Yeah, it's basically the same as you get in any animal species. Is that there's two ways to interact: competitively and cooperatively. And in nature, from the smallest bacteria to all the way up to man at the other end, you have the same battle going on. And what we end up with is basically those two things in balance in terms of which practice is going to be more successful, and you add on top of that personality differences, which I won't get into, but it is kind of a competition. So when one person or group of people competes with another, that's somewhat of a natural tendency because it has been successful in the past, and we have evolved, basically for that tendency if it's a successful thing. At the same time, there is also some success in being cooperative and altruistic to each other. So what we see in society is a combination of those two, probably neither of which will independently go away unless cultural evolution can overcome, too much of the bad side. Is that enough of an answer?
So what you're saying is, just the nature of the game.
Is the nature of survival, yeah. I mean, you can look at any two cultures, you can look at people within a culture, you can look at, say, two siblings, you can look at two different types of religion. They're going to compete with each other to some degree, and they're going to compete at a greater degree whenever there is overlap, especially when it's more extreme, in terms of like survival of one versus the other. So, when it's a zero-sum game, you're going to get that competition. Just kind of how it's almost like a physics thing, one force against another. If there's one sandwich in between us and only one of us can eat, we're going to compete. It's like a force of nature, if you will.
Yeah, instead of just cutting the sandwich in half and you have it in half, I'll take half.
Well, like I say, there's also altruism in our society and in our we see this also in primate species, not just man. And that's the other technique, if you will. That's the other choice we have. The other extreme we have is to cooperate.
Why do you think?
Go ahead.
Why do you think we often choose the competitive instead of the cooperative? Why does that seem to be our default? When I look at history, and kingdoms against kingdoms all throughout history, man against man, it's always for economic reasons. I want something that you have to make my life better. Instead of choosing that cooperative model, what in this particular? Because when I look at the animal kingdom, I'm not that good a biologist, zoologist, but I know animals compete for territory.
They compete for everything, but yeah, okay,
well,
it's fine.
But yet, certain groups. Oh, well, here I don't want to go there because I can see I'm heading down the wrong path. I was thinking about the wolf pack and how they have a territory, but they take care of their own. But why do we choose as to say, here, have the sandwich, and as you're reaching down to get it, I pop you over the head and take it from you? Where that is almost kind of like what's necessary to survive.
I think just if we both think of the average person that we know, believers and among non-believers, you're going to find two nice people.
Sure.
Just in general.
In general.
So I think part of what we're seeing is an exaggeration because of the nature of how leadership comes out of a group. When you get competition, we saw this recently, not taking a side here on the issue, but just to make a point on the gun control issue last time it came up about background checks. When the polls were having about 80% of the public for that, and it didn't even come to a vote in Congress. So you basically have representatives that are more extreme than the individuals. Mm-hmm. And you went and talked about like a king, for example. They're going to be more representative of being protective of their own rights. So you get an exaggeration of the sort of the combative side. And perhaps if you didn't have that, I don't know that you could have that because there's other reasons to have kings and states and cities and stuff. It would be less, but I think that's an exaggeration. That's why we see it. We're more aggressive as a culture because of that.
Okay, but ultimately, you're just saying that's just the way it is.
It's everything out there in nature is a balance of what has worked out to work. When something's not working, the balance will shift according to the circumstances that we have. Mm-hmm. Just like, let's talk about people in Flint with lack of water supply. Their interaction methodology is going to change significantly if the amount of water that they have to survive over changes. So, and the variables all sort of work out.
Okay.
According to the situation.
Okay, I get it. Thank you.
We have a question from this side.
Actually, I'd like to also try to answer his question.
And state your name first.
Right. I'm Matt, or the fat bastard, whatever you want to call me. I would say, and this is my opinion only, but we evolved in a tribal nature. It's a beneficial trait within your tribe to be altruistic to the tribe. And it's beneficial for gathering resources to be hostile to enemy tribes. So we have evolved with a altruistic side, you could say, within the group, and a hostile attitude is in us for enemy groups as part of our evolution. That expanded as our societies grew, where you have nations, you have, we're Americans, we are sticking together, they're wherever they're our enemy. Or we're Muslims, and anyone who's not Muslim is our enemy, or whatever. Religion's another way of expanding the group artificially beyond your local tribe, town, whatever. And that's where you have people with a inflated sense of hostility towards enemy tribes will go out far more extreme. But both parts are part of our evolution. And it manifests generally as in a tribal way, and then it's just been expanded to country, nation, race, whatever. That's how you have the different views as to where your tribe is. But that's my perspective on it.
Sorry, I keep running back. Please. So, evolution has made us savage to the other.
Right.
Did you want to be next, Dave?
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to talk science. Is that an acceptable?
We'll
subject?
take this
Science?
gentleman in the back next.
Science? Can we talk science? Would you be willing to accept as an authority in science Albert Einstein, maybe? I'd like to see if maybe we get some consensus.
When speaking about science, yes.
As an authority in science,
And his fields, sometimes.
as it relates to science, Albert Einstein.
He wasn't
Not on politics, on physics. Could we accept that? I guess I need to know that if I'm going to ask a question, that you recognize the basis of that question as being reasonable
When he's
and
speaking about
sound.
physics, he's an expert.
Okay, that's good to know. Albert Einstein said there is no such thing as dark, only the absence of light. He says there is no such thing as cold, only the absence of heat. I guess at this point I need to double check and see if there's a disagreement.
Generally not.
Okay. There is no such thing as health, only the absence of disease. You assume, if you take the other, that you can measure health on some kind of scale. You can measure the presence of disease. You cannot measure the existence of health. There is no such thing as health, only the absence of a disease. And here's my quandary. When asked, what would it take to convince an atheist that God exists, the answer is that the creator of a natural, scientific-based universe would completely defy that very nature and do something so contrary that it would compel a non-believer to accept it. How many people know what the microbiome is? How many people know what the anthropological history of the microbiome is? How many people know about the holobiont? HOLOBIONT. Anybody? Perhaps there is a phenomena which was the evolution of disease. There is no life, only the absence of death. True? One of the reasons that I ask this is because in multiple presentations that were given, the speakers resulted to using childlike theatrics. And I'm debating whether or not that was because they are obtuse or they're being condescending. So that's my question that I'll ask. Is it because you intended to be condescending, or is it just that you're obtuse?
Well, I'd like to mention something about the light and the dark, just for a neutral comment, and that is, when speaking about whether light is the absence of dark or dark is the absence of light, I think you have to be specific as to whether you're talking about light or pigments, because in the case of...
I didn't say color.
All right. Well, I wanted to at least bring that point out. Yes, okay. All right. We need to take one from this side before we go to this person back here, so that we're alternating back and forth. All right, so who would like to, and This gentleman back here has not asked, so he gets the next shot. Please state your name first.
Yeah, my name's Jeff Magee. Years ago, I had several unexplainable experiences, which I thought were supernatural. Eventually, I got to the point where I understood the power of my mind. My question is, how do you know your experience of God is not really a result of the power of your own mind? Thank you.
Prefer anyone who hasn't answered yet to take that? No? Okay, Carrie's up next for that, then.
You cannot know.
Any response to his? No? Okay, then, gentleman in the back gets the next crack.
So no further answers to that question?
Apparently not. Well, I'm trying to even things out a bit, Doug.
My name is Roman Kulik, and my first time here. My question is not nearly as scientific as what I've heard. So I got a couple.
Speak up, please, into the microphone.
I got a couple questions for both sides. Can I only ask one question?
This is a volley. This is a free interchange.
Okay. All right. There are 8 people on Noah's Ark, and there was, I think, 4 were women, if I'm not mistaken. How did 8 people tend to all those animals for 150 days, and the cleanup, and the mess and all the responsibilities involved, without losing any of the species? When it was dark and doors were closed, there was not a lot of fresh air. The light was probably from lanterns, oil-burning lanterns, caused by a lot of soot, which consumed the oxygen. How do you keep all those animals alive with only 8 people? Second question is, how does someone respond to the prophecies in the Bible of, I'll just give you 2, of in Isaiah chapter 45, where he predicts that King Cyrus was going to destroy Jerusalem and the temple. And he makes that prophecy 100 years before Cyrus is even born. And how do you explain the prophecy of the Jews returning to Israel after being with no land for almost 2,000 years?
So were both of your questions from the believer side, or was one from each side?
One from each side.
Okay, so he's taking the middle position. All right, so the first question he was asking would be answered by the believer side, and the second question he was asking would be answered by the non-believer side. If necessary, we'll have to ask you to ask them again. Go ahead.
When I was at Grace Seminary, John Whitcomb asked that very question in
Which question?
Class in Genesis. Like, if I was Noah, after about 2 or 3 days with all those smelly animals, I'd be ready to just end it all and go out and jump off the boat myself. But he said that most animals, especially mammals, have the ability to hibernate. They have a latent ability to hibernate, and God may have just put them all to sleep, because it said that God remembered Noah. The Hebrew word is zakar. It means that he provided for Noah. So whatever God chose to do, he was able to keep those animals. They may have just been asleep, so that would have been taken care of, a lot of them.
That would be for the, all right, so
Can I present a different idea?
the gentleman who is asking the question gets to respond in kind.
Okay, just...
And to a microphone, please. And you'd be using this microphone to ask that question.
All right, I just want to get some... Okay, I just want to follow up. I mean, does that include... Because this is something that's been bothering me for a long time, and I talked to you a couple times about some things on Friday nights, but... I mean, the chicken and the crocodile and all these animals, I mean, all those went to sleep?
We don't know, but it said God, he remembered Noah, which is the word remember means the idea that we say, remember me, God is providing for Noah in some way, yes, supernaturally.
How do you get a great white shark on the ark? I mean,
the great white shark did not go on the ark. He's still in the water. Fish were still in the water. The nephesh animals were actually on the bark.
okay.
Mhm.
All right.
All right. And now for the question he was asking to the non-believers. Okay. Oh, you want to respond?
In the
Go ahead.
meantime, can I answer one?
Sure.
I want to answer a question that was brought up before, and I just kind of
Well, no, actually, we're still keeping track of his first, and then we can come back, okay?
Sure.
All right. Mike?
I think the question really rose back to what you understand when we talk about inerrancy of Scripture. And there is, within Christianity, a big variety of thought. What I encounter mostly are fundamental, conservative inerrantists that say, basically, if it's in the Bible, it has to be true just the way it's written. And I think that backs Christianity into a corner that it was never supposed to be. Back in the late 1900s, there was a movement of German theologians that created a school called Higher Criticism of Scripture. And in this, they used the grammatical historical exegesis method of determining, they used science to look at what the Scripture really meant. And there was a knee-jerk reaction to that, especially here in the United States. And this fundamentalist idea came to kind of counteract this other liberal idea. To give you an idea, Rudolf Bultmann, which Dave mentioned to begin with, one of his teachings was we have to demythologize the Bible. And in other words, one of the biggest myths is the resurrection of Jesus. We all know that people don't rise from the dead, according to Bultmann. Therefore, what we really have to understand this is every time this message is preached, Christ is raised. So, with that kind of higher criticism of the Scripture, there arose this fundamentalist group that came up and said, no, we stand for the inerrant verbal plenary inspiration of God. Therefore, Noah and the ark happened just like it reads. But there are other Christians who don't believe that. They believe there's a story there to be told. My own personal belief is it doesn't matter. Did it happen? Did it not happen? It doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. What I see in those early portions of Genesis, you have a narrative of why we're in the situation we're in now. That's all it is. It's an explanation, not necessarily this is how it happened. Science always asks how. The Bible answers who. Two very different questions. When we make the Bible into a book of science, you got to be kidding me. It's not a science book. Science says how. The Bible really says who. So when we go back to Noah's Ark, we also have the Gilgamesh epic, which is a Babylonian tale of a great flood. So what I see there in that story, which was widespread, everybody in that culture knew that there was a flood. Well, in the Gilgamesh epic, it's the gods going about doing all this. But in the Noah story, there's one God. And so this message of radical monotheism is what is presented as counterculture to the polytheism of the cultures all around. So now I'm sometimes nailed as a heretic because of my opinions. But I believe that the Scripture is inspired in such a way as it is without error when it comes to explaining everything we need to know to have a right relationship with God. and that's where it's inerrant.
Okay. All right. Now, he has the second question yet to be answered. Is it clear what the question was, or do we need for him to state the question again?
I just had something related to what the pastor just said.
I'm going to call it as we have to go to the next thing. Otherwise, we'll get bogged down a bit. Once again, your question, and because I think it's been too long now since you asked it. This is for the other side to answer.
My second question was foretelling the future of biblical prophecy. Specifically, just two examples. I know according to the scripture there's many of them, but just two of them that I'm concerned about right now. And that's in Isaiah chapter 45, where King Cyrus was king at the time. No, excuse me. Isaiah is writing about King Cyrus, who's not born yet. And he wasn't, by the time of the writing, according to history, Isaiah writes 100 years before King Cyrus is ever born, that Jerusalem, the temple, was going to be destroyed. Is that correct, David? The temple was going to be destroyed by King Cyrus. Am I right about that?
Yes.
Okay. And if I'm not mistaken, the temple was not even, I don't think it was even built yet. And then it was going to be built and then destroyed. Okay, okay, well, basically prophecy. And the second prophecy is in Ezekiel, where it says the Jews are going to return to their homeland. This is their land forever. And how do you explain that? How do you explain to be able to put something that in writing to be that accurate and actually have it come true?
In other words, you're talking about the accuracy of prophecy.
Correct.
Where none of the details could supposedly be known, humanly speaking.
Correct.
Isn't that okay?
Yeah.
Would we have an answer from this side? And Carrie, are you the one to answer it?
Someone else.
Just let me clarify that. It was Cyrus was going to give the decree to go rebuild a temple.
Not to destroy.
120 years before he was born.
Okay. So. Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Anybody in this? Yes, Bill. We'd like to hear from you. Again, state your name like everybody else does.
I bet it's Bill.
I bet it is. Bill.
Good evening. Now, what was that name again? Yeah, my name is Bill Zersher, and hello, everyone. Just wanted to reply to that, or at least a piece of the question there. Yeah, you're referring to Isaiah 45. It's a very interesting passage because this is the only place that I'm aware of in the Old Testament where Isaiah actually calls Cyrus the Messiah, which is kind of interesting because you would think if the Christian viewpoint is right, he would have reserved that title for someone else. This gets into the question of when the actual documents were written. Most critical scholars, to my understanding, most critical scholars would say that the book of Isaiah, which is the longest of the prophetic writings, was written by 2 or possibly 3 different individuals, and that second Isaiah wrote the middle batch of books, including 45, and that he was writing at the time of the end of the Babylonian captivity. And what he was capturing there, and the reason he was so complimentary towards Cyrus, is because he was capturing the exiled Judahites' excitement at the prospect of being able to return. Because we know from history that Cyrus not only emancipated the enslaved Judahites, but sponsored and financed the rebuilding of the temple, the Second Temple. So in my view, it's very clearly explained by Isaiah speaking to his countrymen about current events, helping them understand current events, cheering them on for the task that lay ahead of them, which was a big task to basically rebuild their civilization. And as proof that Isaiah, or second Isaiah in this case, could not tell the future, I would point out that there are 2 places, and forgive me if I can't recite the exact verse from memory, but it's somewhere around 53 or 56, where he says, from now on, anyone who attempts to invade Jerusalem will be defeated. And then again later he says, the uncircumcised will never again enter you, you being Jerusalem. And of course, we know from history that Jerusalem was conquered close to 40 times since that point.
Bill, I have a question for clarification. I believe one of the points that was being made was Cyrus is called out by name, like nobody else is, way before he ever existed. Isn't that one of the points we're trying to make? Yes. And so, while your answer is good as far as it goes, I don't think it's answering the question of how did Isaiah or whoever wrote in his name was able to call out Cyrus by name way before he existed.
No, sorry, I'm making the point that second Isaiah wrote as these events were unfolding. So it was written it was written when Cyrus was doing this.
Not way before. Is that
Correct.
what your contention is? Okay, that's your contention. All right.
All right, so that's the answer. So in the second question regarding the...
Whoa. Okay.
It was part of that.
Well, I'll stay here until I know whether I can address it or not.
We need to have people speaking at the microphones because of the cameras. Even if that means a long trek each time. We are under primitive conditions.
No, I still have to say that.
All right? If you want to stick around, that's fine too. Go ahead.
And the other one was, I accept the answer, that's fine. The other one is the Jews returned to their homeland in 1948 after being gone almost 2,000 years. So.
Is that a question?
Yeah, because it's prophecy. So.
Or it's how so? That's a new question, actually. Okay, all right, part of it. That aspect, though. Did you care to respond to that, Bill, or does somebody else care to? Oh, we have it. Yes, go right ahead and state your name.
I'm David Wise, and basically self-fulfilled prophecy. The Jews living in the diaspora, in exile, were familiar with that passage. It was something that they looked forward to, that they worked towards. The Zionist movement was formed based on that, and they were very active in trying to bring it about. And then at the end of World War II, a second diaspora, could we call that? I mean, refugees moving around, that gave motion to fulfilling the Zionist movement. So self-fulfilled prophecy, I say, would be the answer.
All right. It's this side's turn to ask a question if it wishes to. Is there any question from this side right now? Yes, Bill? And we have only 2 people over here on this side that have not participated yet, according to my count. You're free to participate. Yes.
Okay, so once again, the name is Bill Zersher, but I'm going to pull a switch on you. I've got a question for the atheists. My question for the atheists.
And then stand over at this side of the microphone, please.
Start over. What's your name?
You guys are so strict. Okay, my question for the atheists. If there's no supernatural and there's no souls, and we're just material beings, where does our consciousness come from?
Any takers? I might point out while we have a taker coming up that I asked something akin to this on January 14, 2014, and that is there transcendent thought? You might recall that.
Okay. All right, where does consciousness come from? You want the short answer? The shorter answer is we don't know right now. Neurological studies are approaching that. Obviously, this is an old question. It's what's the philosophical? It's the big question or the hard question or whatever. It is still something that neurology is looking into, and they do not have an explanation for it. Therefore, on the atheist side, there is no jump to a conclusion of any type. It's just currently unknown. Check back in 50 years.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have a lull. Do we still have? Would you like to come up?
I have a question for the Christian.
Then,
okay.
Then you get to.
I'm a Christian, but I got a question.
Then you get to stand on that side.
Okay.
And state your name first, please.
Watch it. It has atheist cooties.
Okay. I don't. Listen. I'm Claudia. Claudius. Claudia. Okay. This has always bothered me, and I try to put it, compartmentalize it in my mind and put it in a case and lock it up, and it's not good. It's like I don't have total peace, and it's not just emotionally driven, but loving God, how could he create a hell that would be forever and ever without, weeping and gnashing and teeth burning, even if it was just not that, even if it was having to listen to some kind of music you really hate, if it was having to stand at the DMV, whatever it is, it's just that how could a loving God let you do that forever and ever without end, forever and ever without end?
In other words, shades of Manuel Noriega in 1989, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have any takers on that side? How can such things be? Any takers? Okay, he gets the next one. Doug does.
Well, I think the question is misframed in the sense that it makes us sound like God's making that happen, when in fact the reverse is true. God gives everybody ample opportunity to choose the alternative, and after a lifetime of persuasion they still refuse. What else do you expect?
Any rebuttals from this side? Go ahead.
Mark, I was in a debate several years ago against a famous Christian astronomer. Do you remember his name? Hugh Ross, thank you. Hugh Ross was presented with that question from our side, and his answer was, hell is actually the most loving thing a divine Father could ever do, because us atheists would be so unhappy in heaven having to cohabitate with you guys that putting us in hell would actually be beneficial and good for us. So it's because God loves us that he's going to burn us alive forever and ever.
Seriously, that's what he said.
Oh my goodness.
That's Hugh for you.
Yeah. Just real quick, Mike Bosworth again. This whole concept of hell really is formed by Dante's Inferno, which is not written in the scripture. The burning lake of fire and then imagination of Dante's Inferno creates this. And again, from my very liberal perspective, being a conservative Christian, that lake of fire represents the most horrible consequences that John could think of entering an eternity without God. So I don't necessarily believe there's a lake of fire that we're going to burn and turn into crispy critters for all eternity. I do believe it's akin to being absent from the presence of God, which is, I think, life, light, warmth. Does that make any sense?
So in other words, would you be saying that John is picturing something that maybe either is the best that could be occurring or the worst, depending upon your perspective?
Yeah, I would say that that's true.
Which? Best or worst?
Hell?
Yes, better. In other words,
no, it's definitely meant to be a picture of don't want to go there type of a situation. Though I have
in other words, things could only be worse than what he stated.
Things could be only worse. Well, I'm saying what he likens it like to the reality behind the picture is what is eternity like without God? What is life like without God? And that is, well, the closest thing I come up with it, guys, is like being thrown alive in a lake of fire.
All right. So neither one, I guess. Okay. At this point, we have about 38 minutes to go, I guess, if I'm reading the clock correctly, until 9 o'clock. We've had just about everybody participating. So we have only one on each side now. I guess there's somebody entered the picture here. Please. And this raises a question of whether you want to continue at this point up until then, or would you like a 5-minute break to come back? Which would it be? 5-minute break? Raise your hand. Continue? Raise your hand. Okay, we continue then. All right. Let's see. Who had the last question? Was it? I think it was asked in this direction. So that means that. Yeah, you get to ask a question if you wish to, but I think Dave gets the next shot. If you want to ask a question, Dave.
I want to answer one.
Okay, I guess we forestalled you. Yes. Okay, then I guess you get that opportunity.
I must be the shortest person here. Yeah, I would like to answer all of those questions that I've heard just for the last few minutes, but
yes.
I would like to start with one of the things that was mentioned right off the bat was, I think Wayne asked this question or brought this up.
Please speak into the microphone.
The idea was, what about Charlemagne? And, we're talking about Jesus. I'm doing a thing on Islam right now. Jesus never killed anybody. Muhammad killed lots of people. Jesus never raped anybody. Muhammad raped a lot of people. Jesus never, forced anybody to believe. Muhammad forced on the pain of death. I mean, this is what Christianity is teaching, and if you read the Sermon on the Mount, none of those things. Charlemagne was not a Christian. Okay, he held within Catholicism. They were killing Christians and Jews. They were fleeing. And so what we're seeing is what you're talking about Christians. That's not Christianity. If it's not biblical, it's not Christian. And Jesus isn't telling people to kill people. So if you regardless of what you call yourself, that's not Christianity. So, anyway.
I have a question then to ask in return, perhaps. And that is, if we were to segregate all the people that would not actually be Christians from the category of things that were mentioned, would you find, nevertheless, any actual Christians who are guilty of any of those things that he was mentioning? And if so, what would your response be?
Yeah, Christians sometimes do things that are not Christian. They disobey God. We all do. Nobody's perfect. But normally Christians do not kill people. That's
Are there any examples where they did, though?
Sometimes, the Bible does clearly say, thou shalt not murder. It's in the PL sense. There's sometimes when, in order to defend your life or your family, you have to do something to defend yourself. And so in the time of war, yes, there is killing, because in most cases you either kill or be killed. So, yes, there's times for that. There's a time for a lot of things.
Would you, and further clarifying, would you regard any of those that are still left as Christians on that side to be participating in anything that's not justified and being held up supposedly for participating that way?
What?
As a positive example, whereas it wouldn't be a positive example. I think what he was driving at is that there are some, even after all is said and done, that there's still examples of people who we would regard as being good Christians, but still have participated in heinous crimes. Isn't that about what you were saying? I want some clarification from Wayne.
I didn't do a good job of placing the question mark at the end of my tirade there. And the real question mark is, would Christianity even exist today were it not for the barbarism of the past?
Well, the answer to that question, this is exactly what Muhammad did. The entire Turkey, all the 7 churches in the book of Revelation in Asia Minor, he basically killed and moved out. He had 3 things. He would immigrate, increase, and eliminate. That's what he did at every place that he went and his group went. All of North Africa, the Council of Hippo. That's where we decided on 27 books of the New Testament. That was all Christian, and he wiped that out. That's all Muslim now. Either you become what they do, they move in, and you have 3 choices. And this is, you have a choice of leaving sometimes, or dying, or taking a jizra. You have a tax. And so, and it's such a, and if you look at all the details in the, what is involved in this tax is involved is absolute total servitude. You don't even have enough money to leave, so you're basically trapped there. That's what most Christians in Muslim countries, they can't even leave. So they just don't have that option. So that is what's happened is Christians became Christians not on the basis of you have to become a Christian or die. They become Christians because they want to. Christianity was never by the sword. Jesus never told people to kill, to force a person to believe. People believed in Muslim countries in spite of the fact that they might die. And that's what we said. The blood of the martyrs was the seed of the church. They died, but people saw qualities that they wanted in their own life. And they became Christians based upon the character. That's what we talk about fishing with light. When you see the character, there is a spirit. Everyone has a conscience, either accusing them or excusing them. Romans 1, the light that lighteth every
That's
man
Romans
that comes into
2.
the world.
That's
yeah,
Romans 2.
I know it's Romans 2. But basically the idea was that, thank you, basically the idea is that we have a conscience and we can appeal to that conscience even among atheists. Atheists even have consciences. It's hard to believe. No one. But, just kidding. But anyway, yes, we can do that. And I think that that's what Christianity does. It appeals to a person because of the character quality of Christ and the character of his disciples. I mean, disciples didn't always do it right, but basically many times they did. So I have about 10 other things I would like to mention, but the heart is deceitfully wicked. Who can know it? So yes, we have basically, in me dwelleth no good thing, but we are fearfully and wonderfully made. So there's a kind of a dipole. Yes, there is a evil in the heart of every man, but God as spirit comes to live within him. So the things that we used to want to do, normally we don't want to anymore when we become Christians.
Thanks for that, Dave. I want to put a question on because you mentioned the Sermon on the Mount, which I think is very, very interesting stuff and generally pretty good stuff. My question, and I want to stay away from politics, but I think all of us are familiar with situations where public officials have sought to put monuments of the Ten Commandments in public buildings, in government buildings, or in courthouses, things like that. And that generally, at least these days, creates a big ruckus and so on. And I'm not necessarily looking for an immediate answer on this. This is really something for everybody to think about, I think, on both sides of the aisle. Why is it that we don't hear about government officials wanting to put the Sermon on the Mount in government buildings? Why is it the Ten Commandments rather than the Sermon on the Mount? Food for thought.
Is there any response from this side, nevertheless? I want to see if there's anybody else right now. Anybody else, especially the ones who have not responded yet? Anybody? All right, then you get by default. Go ahead, take it.
Well, my take is the Ten Commandments are more inclusive of a Judeo-Christian heritage as opposed to strictly a Christian one from the Sermon on the Mount. I'd like to respond to a couple earlier questions. Your thesis that the Jews coming back into Israel after almost 2,000 years was a self-fulfilling prophecy does not explain why the prophecy came into being in the first place. It simply provides a naturalistic explanation for how it could have occurred. It doesn't include the prophecy. Secondly, the thesis that how do you know God is real? You only know it in your mind. I forget who it was that made that assertion. What's unique about the thesis that you can't know that God exists or that he does anything miraculous in your life because it just happens in your mind is, I forgot who made that assertion. No responders now. Is belayed by the fact that Jesus claims to be able to do two types of miracles that we can observe today. Instantaneous supernatural physical healings and instantaneous supernatural deliverance of natural disasters. Many of which, for whatever it's worth, I've seen in my own life many times, which is the main reason I'm a Christian. My mind does not influence clouds or wind or any other natural phenomena, but I've seen those things change instantly as a result of prayer.
Okay. Any other questions that either side would like to ask the other? Kerry, you get to be ambivalent. Which side would you like to be on this side?
I would like to ask it of both parties, both sides.
Okay, the same question?
The same question.
Okay, it's a neutral enough question that...
That's correct.
All right, go right ahead, and I don't know which mic you'll take this time.
Just gotta take both
How about
of them.
this one right here?
Both of them at the same time.
How about this one right here?
In the effort to determine what is true, or at least probable, is emotion ever beneficial?
Okay. I believe that if anybody on this side wants to answer, they get the first shot. Anybody? All right, then anybody on this side? Dave.
I love this question. Perception is an individual experience that you have. What is true has nothing to do with you. Your knowing truth has nothing to do with you. I remember that some of the most brilliant words that were ever spoken to me were spoken to me by a Lakota young man who had just discovered his own cultural identity and his religion. And he'd said something very profound to me. He said, everything that I tell you is a lie until you find it to be true. And you cannot find truth. Truth finds you. Basically, what he was saying is, and this goes to the question of why aren't Christians willing to consider other possibilities and accept the possibility or probability that there is no God? It's because of the reality. What you learn, you cannot unlearn. What you come to know, you cannot unknow. What you come to realize as being true, you cannot unknow that as truth. So the issue isn't for me to compel you to believe as I believe, although sometimes I think in the dialogue that's what we end up wrestling over, trying to see who can be more theatrical, who can be more compelling. The reality is, if we want to talk about science, I think Christians are just as competent and just as knowledgeable about emerging science as atheists, agnostics, skeptics. As a matter of fact, I think that science proves a lot of the Bible, for me, as being true. Science illuminates parts of the Bible that are maybe written in an abstract, metaphorical way as having real substance. So the issue is, if we cannot know truth, truth has to find us, comes to us in the form of an epiphany, that it isn't contingent upon emotions, but if we understand that tucked neatly and securely on the anterior surface of the cerebral cortex are two almond-sized nuclei that serve as the social and emotional data center for the human brain that reacts in millionths of a second to stimuli, flooding our body with hormones, causing us to react or not react, to fight or flight or faint or freeze or focus. We can't separate ourselves from our own physiology, but we can't use our own physiology to say and to validate that something is not true. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Okay, terrific. A concomitant thought that I offered at one of these open fora last year was, I think that any scientist, whatever his persuasion, would probably get the same data in the laboratory. As we're using the same instruments under the same conditions, we'll probably get about the same results. The only question would be at that point, to what would we be attributing the phenomenon which we believe we are observing as a result of the data that we are collecting, but not the raw data itself. There's probably going to be not very much difference between them, assuming competence is the hallmark. So, yes, Dave, do you have a comment? You raised your hand.
Yes, I would like to address the passage in Isaiah. May I do that?
Briefly?
Okay. There was a reason why the higher critical scholars separated the Isaiah parts 1 and 2, partially because there was a little difference in style, but there was more similarities than differences. But part of it is the fact that the last Isaiah is like a mini Bible. The first 39 chapters basically are a picture of the Old Testament. And then starting with verse 40, we have the last 27 chapters are a beautiful picture of the New Testament. And it starts off for that very thing, that he's coming back. And so there's also another reason. The reason why the higher critical scholars did not like the last half of the book of Isaiah was because there were prophecies that would definitely show that these things were written before the actual event that happened. So they made up this thing. It's an unknown author they come up with. And the very fact that there is no substance to their argument is just the fact that they do not believe in miracles. So they base their whole argument on it. Let me just read you something that I think is interesting. Skeptical theologians are unwilling to believe that God can supernaturally reveal the future to his divinely called prepared prophets, and the most assume that the last part of Isaiah was written by an unknown writer living among the exiles in Babylon after Cyrus had conquered the city. The criticism not only accuses a prophet of deception, but also defies the uniform belief of both Jews and Christians all through the centuries. Furthermore, both apostles and Jesus himself frequently quote from both sections of Isaiah, always attributing them to Isaiah with no suggestion that they refer to two different men. The oldest extant manuscript of Isaiah is of the Dead Sea Scrolls, dated about 100 BC, and gives no indication whatsoever that it was not written by the same man. The same is true of the Greek Septuagint translation of the Old Testament. In fact, all genuine historical evidence agrees with the unity of Isaiah.
You're citing from what, if possible, Dave?
This is Henry Morris's Study Bible.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big topic. I would suggest those interested also consult the Jewish Study Bible, published by the Tanakh Publication Society, Oxford University Press. There's a very good discussion in there, written by Jewish scholars about the Jewish Bible, what Christians call the Old Testament, having commandeered it from Judaism. But I strongly suggest you check out that alternative viewpoint. And Dave, maybe this would be a time to put forward a challenge for some future debate. I'd be interested in debating you about whether Isaiah 53 concerns Jesus or not.
All right, point noted. Any other thoughts? Yes, Mark.
Question?
Sure.
Mark Smith, question for the Christians. I'm curious what you've described yourself as a liberal, conservative Christian, and I appreciate your viewpoints. In general, for you guys, I appreciate the dialogue, the back and forth, etc. What motivates you guys as believers to want to spend time in the same atmosphere as the non-believers doing these kind of things?
We have a taker. Do we have any others who would want to? Dave's just the person in the back. Anybody in the back here wants to take that? Or Mike, you haven't spoken in a while. If you wish to, sure. We're trying to spread it out as evenly as we can here, and encourage everybody to participate at all possible. Go ahead.
I think I don't have an agenda when I sit down and talk with you to save you. Can't do it. But when I hear your faith arguments for why you're skeptical, and it helps me to think through what I believe. And in thinking through what I believe, I got to listen to you. Because if you've got a good argument, if you've got a rational argument, I want to filter it through so that I make sure that what I've come to understand, what I've come to believe, still holds up. I appreciate when we have good dialogue. Oh my goodness, that just kind of sparks me. I like the classroom. I like getting in and talking about different ideas and different concepts. And so that's how come I enjoy this. I'm not trying to convert you. I don't think I could. I don't think I could lay out any argument or any story that would possibly change your mind. It's you come to belief in God through a personal experience that is scientifically unquantifiable, and it's the preponderance of physical evidence is contrary to biblical faith, and yet I believe. That's irrational. But yet I consider myself a rational person. So when I hear you bring up, the controversy about Deutero Isaiah and why Wayne, like this, the things that you've brought up about, why didn't God tell us about this, or why are these examples of Christianity they're murdering people, and it just makes me want to think, well, why is this really the case? Why do I have a Charlemagne who's a king, says in Christian, going to Christianize all of Europe again at the cost of thousands and thousands of lives? And you got to think, why did that happen? And then, Will? What's your name again? Mark. Sorry, I tried to remember everybody's name. Why does God apparently not do anything? That's a great question. And of course, the dumb answer is, well, how do you know he's not doing anything? That's the dumb answer. But really, when you look, you wonder why. What's going on? And so it challenges me as a person who believes that there is a God to kind of filter through. Okay, that's got merit because it looks the same way to me. Why isn't he doing anything? Or really confusing, when you swing in some of the circles I swing in, like our brother over here said, I have seen something that I cannot explain. A person who is disease-ridden, and someone prays over them, and they get well. How do you explain that? And then I have my own situation where I have thousands of people praying for my son, and he's still laid out. 5 years, still laid out. What do you do with that?
That was the object of one of the talks. It was, does prayer work?
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a question to ask you in return, because it might be on the minds of others, so stick around for a moment. Have you heard anything in the discussions since you've been here, the September 24, 2014, and so forth? Have you heard anything from the other side that has not just caused you to think your position through, but has actually changed your mind on any particular item? And if so, what would the largest such item be?
Well, the ultimate item is belief in God.
That changed your mind about
No, that would be the ultimate item.
Right, but the largest such item that you might have encountered among the things that caused you to change your mind?
Things that have caused me to research, I think that the scholar that we had talked about the historicity of the Bible. Man, I thought he
Richard Carrier, October 23, 2014.
Great job. Mm-hmm. And it caused me to go back and have to research, because after a while you don't think about those things in this field, and so in this field as a pastor, and so that caused me to go back and to do some research, and to understand that everybody has a stake in the game, and they've got to prove their point, and so the evidence that they gather is in support of their point. And it ultimately comes down to, I'm going to believe what I want to believe.
Well, hopefully we've gotten beyond the point of position papers.
It seems that way, though, doesn't it? You know, when I have an axe to grind, I can find the data to support my position.
I think there's, if I may comment at this point, I think there is ample reason to believe that when we have formulated a position, whichever side of the aisle we might be on at any given point in time, that we had good reasons for formulating that position. It doesn't mean, however, that it couldn't stand some improvement, or maybe even an overhaul, depending upon what else happens. I'm reminded of that blind man and the elephant thing that says that each was partly in the right and all were in the wrong. Do you have any comments?
I think that we don't have a clue when it comes right down to it.
About anything?
About anything.
Would you say that's much in the line of Edison, who said we don't know a millionth of 1% about anything?
Was Edison?
Edison.
It was his mom?
Well, there's no way of telling who
I'm not
might
sure
have passed
who
it to him,
came
but
to
it's
that.
attributed to Edison.
I believe faith and doubt walk hand in hand.
Yeah, but would you put it to that level? A
Yeah.
millionth of 1%?
I would say that I think there's things you can be pretty well certain of because of experience in history.
Mhm.
I mean, there's things you can pretty well predict about what's going to happen with a degree of accuracy. But ultimately, whether science comes up with ultimate answers, or they still come down to, we're not really sure, but this is how it seems to all work, it's ultimately down to what you decide to believe in. You can believe in science, you can believe in theism, you can believe in scientific theism. There's a group called Biologos. I don't know if you're familiar with Biologos.
Mm-hmm. They know about it a lot, I'm sure.
They are evolutionary Christians. And their arguments are for evolution. It's really pretty fascinating to me. And so I've been reading some of those types of information. But to get back to your question, the reason why we need to do this and talk is because, just like someone said, we're all good people. There's no bad people here. I want you to come along and walk with me, and I want to walk with you, and then that's what we're supposed to be, together, right? And in the end, when the breathing policy is expired, I guess then we'll figure out who had the right opinion.
Okay. We're drawing to a close here. We have about 9.5 minutes. I would like to afford an opportunity to the other side with the same degree and that of question. That is, I'd asked whether or not there was anything in any of the interchanges since he's been here that caused him to change his mind about anything. Is there anything in these interchanges that's caused any of those on the other side to change their mind about any one thing? And if so, who would like to volunteer for that? Anybody at all? Or you just kept your changed mind? Anybody? Had you all stuck with the same positions that you had? All right. Did you have a comment?
I did.
All right. Oh, he wants to respond. I'm sorry.
No, I just have a comment.
Go ahead. He gets an opportunity, Dave.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes.
Benito Franchi. I would like to make this statement. There is no death, only the absence of life.
Okay, that was reflective of something else. Yes.
Well, I love these debates, discussions. I learned so much from you guys. Partially because I learned questions that you're asking. So I end up writing a paper on every question that you brought up. And Wayne, I thank you for writing out your objections to the Messianic prophecy because I answered every single one of them in a paper. And so, I appreciate your research and what you do, and I think there is a valid answer for everything you brought up. but it gets fairly technical when somebody like yourself does his homework. But at the same time, I do think that that what's happening, like with Richard Carrier, is what they do. The higher critics will find something in the pagan world that somehow relates to something that the Bible teaches, and somehow make the Bible say, well, that's where the Bible got it, when it has nothing really to do with where the Bible. But there are some relationships. Sometimes you can find connections, and sometimes they make up connections. But anyway, I think that everything in the Bible is literally true. Literally. That the flood of Noah was real, that the animals were in the ark. I believe in the inerrant, plenary, verbal inspiration of Scripture. And I believe that anything that is different from that is not Christian. If it's not biblical, it's not Christian. So I would have a few differences with our pastor. I think he's a wonderful guy, but we may have some differences there. But anyway, just really enjoy these times. And I consider you
not a Christian, man. That's pretty rude.
No, I just say that if it's not what I consider to be biblical, I don't consider it Christian. Yes, I know you're a Christian, but I'm just saying that I don't. I come from a seminary where we would shoot people on sight if they held to anything but literal inerrancy of Scripture. So that's where I'm coming from. Anyway.
Okay. I have to shut it down pretty soon here. Now, is there anything? I've tried to maintain as much of a possible balance as I could with questions and answers from each side to the other. I hope I've succeeded in that endeavor. Is there disagreement on either side that I have not afforded an opportunity to that side? Enough of an opportunity. Is there any disagreement with that? If so, let it be stated now. He wants to state something or not? All right. If not, I would like to thank you for all coming. And are we still going to Norm's afterwards, if you'd like to? Does somebody need to reserve a table or whatever? That's a mile north of here on the same side of the street on Beach Boulevard. Bill, do you have one more comment?
The name's Bill Zersher again, once again. Just wanted to say thank you. I thought you did a terrific job moderating.
Thank you very much. I had the opportunity, by the way, to moderate a creation evolution debate on May 28, 1998, and they also gave me high marks. This is the first time I've moderated since then, anything. And I thought I could do well, and that's why I got involved with this. Any last comment? Last comment, yes.
In response to an earlier question of why do Christians evangelize, more or less, my response is because the truth matters. Jesus claims he's the truth. He can prove it to you if you're open-minded. If you're not, you won't see anything. And with all due respect to you, my theology used to be a lot like yours, and I never saw much power in my prayer. Then I decided to take Jesus literally. Bam. I've seen lots of miracles since then.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Well, then, until next time, we hope that would be next month, but we'll find out for sure. This has been event number 21, the Open Forum. And yes, Dave?
We do have a date for the next debate.
Which is when?
It's March, let's see. March 2nd, Monday, March 2nd. Monday? No. It's Tuesday, March 1st. That's it. And March 2nd just happens to be Bruce's birthday, so we couldn't do it that day. So we're doing it Monday, Tuesday, March 1st. Yeah, that's it.
So we don't get to do it on Leap Day. Too bad.
And the reason we're doing it that day is because we have Orlene Kurla to represent our side on global warming. She's an expert in that subject, and we wanted to get some fresh blood in here, and she's just going to happen to be here at that time. So
All right, so each side then will be able to stake out its environmental position. And the crazy part of it is, Dave, I almost brought up the topic of environmentalism as kind of a surprise question, but you put it to it right now.
So, anyway.
Yes,
So she is a Christian?
She's actually a Mormon, but she works with me in Eagle Forum, and she's written 2 books on the subject, so
all right.
It ought to make it interesting.
Well, sharpen your pencils or do your internet research, whatever it takes, and we'll expect both sides to be well prepared next time. Yes.
Is our speaker, the speaker that you, is she for, is she saying that it's man-made global warming that is this, or is she saying no, there's other,
There has been no global warming for the last 18 years.
There's been no global
None.
warming for the last 18 years.
Right.
That's what she's gonna
That's her thesis?
That's not her only thesis, but basically I will probably be joining her on that debate, but I'm going to give her the majority of the time.
Interesting.
All right. Then this has been the open forum, and we want to sign off and say goodbye, and we'll see you at Norm's. Thank you very much for your time.